Catch me if you can. Catch me if you can. Catch me if you can. Catch me if you. Catch me if you. Catch me if you.
That's for all the millennials who have very embarrassing memories of where they probably heard that song. Sorry, I need to change the white balance on this and probably the exposure. Look at me pretending I know what I'm doing. Look at this. I'm so orange. Let's see. Aha, perfect. Just amazing. Perfect. Tried to make it a little warmer, but gonna have to give up on that. That is a great song. The cultural reference point for which is probably really embarrassing for most people who still remember it. That is Catch Me If You Can off of the Further EP by a guy who goes by the name Out of Sight. And very embarrassingly, that came up on some like recommended list for me because I think I'm for some reason we're like a family of hipsters, so we don't use Spotify. We have some like shared YouTube premium music subscription or something. And so YouTube must have been getting really desperate and searching for recommendations from like 13-year-old YouTube videos that I watched. And so it just pulled up the Further EP, which of course my only other exposure to was on Ray William Johnson's YouTube channel, who I believe is a content creator, that absolutely demonic term, who's now I think in his 40s. I don't even know, I don't know what he does now. I know he's like a recurring joke on like Oni plays and stuff like that. He had like Your Favorite Martian, all his music projects and stuff. But no, I remember Out of Sight was like weirdly a friend of the show or something like that back when he was doing Equals D. But it's like such a sick little EP of like 6 or 7 songs or something like that. Like I heard that song for the first time in probably like a decade or more. I can't even remember when that came out, but it had been so long, and I was like, you know what though? This kind of kicks ass. Like, the fact that it's like kind of weird, like hip hop, but still like real instruments and stuff like that. It was 2010, so it was like right on the cusp of when hip hop went to like fully just like dub instruments and sampling and stuff like that. Like there was still like electronic sampling. It was still like the samples were still of like raw instruments and like raw vocal tracks and stuff like that, rather than just like fully electronic or whatever. Which means I don't know. That was just like a very important that was like a very important little EP to me. I remember when it came out because I was like, wow, this is like really immaculately constructed. These songs are just gorgeous, like little tapestries in and of themselves. They're beautiful, but I don't think anyone listens to it anymore. And of course, I like Googled the guy's name to find the songs to take the drum track out, and it was immediately like, the dude's still making music, man. He's uploading stuff to SoundCloud all the time. He's just like trucking along, man. Like years and years later, he still releases a track probably like once every 6 months, once every 4 months, something like that. And he's still got that weird kind of like multiracial voice where you can't quite tell if he's like a white guy like imitating like a different ethnicity or like what's going on. And I don't really care to find out. I don't really care. I mean, there's a picture of a forlorn looking man in a car on the cover who appears to maybe be white or Hispanic or something like that, but I don't know. He could be, much like Ray William Johnson, he could be any guy in his 40s now, and I wouldn't recognize him. Yeah, so that's kind of embarrassing. But I was like, this is such a sick track. I can't not play this after hearing it. And it's filled with like all the drum fills and all of the kind of breaks all over that song they're actually really pretty sick, I think. Like, I actually didn't really have the courage to play them like they are on the album because they're just like these raging samples of like old school rock and roll drum fills. Like, they're not even as intricate as what I was doing. Like, I was doing some stuff like this. On the track, they're pretty much not like that at all. They're just like very old school hard rock fills. Kind of big, muscular, all fortissimo dynamics wise. You know, it's kind of fun. And there's a great contrast there because then it's like, it was 2010, so it was right around the time that like, you know, hip hop production kind of went in that direction of like very like glitchy sounding swing and stuff like that. It was kind of a couple of years before that really took off. So you can start to hear a little bit of that influence creep in because you can't really tell if it's fully straight time or fully swung. It kind of switches between the two. Like the verses are so sparse that you're like, it's swung, but it's not like super heavily swung. And then out of all the transition points in the song, it's these big straight 16th note drum fills. So there's this beautiful contrast where like you can never quite tell if it's in triplet time or not. So you have like kind of a swung kick and snare that's like a little like loose and sloppy, and then you have these very like rapid, frantic sounding drum fills that are all 16th notes. So even just that bit of contrast is like pretty cool and pretty interesting. As you can tell, I have not had the will to do a ton of metal songs recently, which I don't know why that is. I think it's I'm struggling to find things that I think reveal something new or something I haven't done yet. Because the truth is, like, some of the songs that we've done, I feel like, you know, I could redo them and try to get them like really smack dab perfect. But like, unless I was committed to like having a much better produced setup here and just playing over the original tracks to a metronome, I'm not going to get the sound quality really any better. You know what I mean? So it's like a lot of them I feel like I've gotten as close as I can reasonably get them by just like using an AI to strip out the drums, you know? So I keep looking for things that are like new and interesting and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm struggling a little bit with that, so I'm branching out a little bit to like the other musical influences that I have just in order to have something off the beaten path that I think might be cool for people to hear. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I haven't done one of these in a while, man. I'm like, my muscle memory for how to do it is a little shot. It's been like weeks because I kind of took a holiday break and then I got I got home, and every time I thought about doing it, I was like, I don't know what the hell to talk about. I mean, I have things to talk about, but it's just like there's a lot of ambiguity in terms of relating it to sort of the metal stuff that I kind of started the show with. You know, there's nothing about the show that means that it has to be metal. You know what I mean? But, you know, that's a huge focus of mine, and I'm trying to think of new stuff. You know, I mean, one of the more exciting things is that I'm currently actually, for basically the first time since I started playing literally like marching snare drum or something like that. I'm yeah, literally since then, since I was like learning how to play marching snare, I'm actually taking lessons with a very exciting person who I will not name just because we haven't had a ton of time to go through too much yet, but it has been fun. And it's so funny because like, you know, I'm like, you know, we've talked about this a lot. Like I'm trying to go through all of my books here and stuff like that, you know, trying to just like educate myself on my own, do as much autodidactically as I can, you know? And what's kind of funny about it is that like I almost in doing that I almost sort of like skipped a couple steps because it's like because it's like, you know, the books are really useful and I get a lot of value out of the experience, yada yada, right? But actually taking lessons with someone who's like a pro and who knows what they're doing, it's so funny because it's like he pretty quickly was able to assess like my skill level. And then from there it was like I was like, okay, well, he knows I'm not like a beginner, right? So like what is he going to launch into this with? And it's like if some of these books would have you believe anything, it's like, oh, if you're not a beginner, if you're like an intermediate drummer, hello, good to see you. If you're an intermediate drummer, you know, some of these books would have you believe like, oh, good, you're not a beginner. So like step one is going to be, we're going to start you on the basics of metric modulation, right? Which is literally like, that's actually literally how rhythmic illusions, right? One of the probably most famous like rock instructional books ever basically starts you like literally, I think by like page 2 of like actual music past the introduction. Yeah, so like literally literally you get the introduction and then chapter 1 is definitions. So like basically he's like he's telling you like his own personal vocabulary that he's using. So this assumes like very very intimate familiarity with you know music in a way that like it almost assumes you're beyond intermediate. It really assumes that you're like really in for the long haul, which is fine, right? I've gotten a lot of value out of this book, even though I would be lying if I said I had gotten particularly far in it, right? But then basically after those definitions are over, it's like, oh, the first piece of sheet music you see, it's like, oh, displacement. Like we're immediately starting on like beat displacement and metric modulation, right? And so I kind of assumed that it was like, okay, I'm just going to get grilled on like high level stuff immediately that I'm going to like fail at. And the funny part about it was no. Like what instead happened was you know, I got the sheet music for an exercise that is very simple that I've seen 100 million people suggest, and that I've always just been like, yeah, I get that, and never really actually dedicated any real time to doing it well. And guess what? I'm like kind of terrible at it, right? I mean, that's the funny part is like, that's the good thing about, the metal stuff is like, I'm not super inspired to share with you a lot of metal stuff right now because I feel like I'm kind of struggling to find things that would be like interesting to watch or interesting to talk about, just because we've talked about a lot of like my absolute favorite, like highest tier stuff on this stream. But the funny part about it is that just with like the act of taking lessons for the first time ever on the drum kit, because I've never taken kit lessons. The only lessons I ever got were for hand technique when I was learning snare, right? And it's like to actually be talking to like a pro musician who knows what they're talking about. It's like the things that they're teaching are like these survival kit tools for like how you actually successfully play this instrument and sound good in the context of like other musicians or an audience are actually like depending on your performance sounding good. And it's like some of those techniques, it's just like have gotten so lost in the weeds because I've been like trying to do the Gavin Harrison metric modulation stuff, right, for like, years now, and making slow progress, but it's all this very like high level sort of like theoretical stuff rather than just sort of like basic, I don't know, like practical how to's. You know what I mean? It's like I just find it very interesting. Sorry, I'm having some volume issues with my in-ears here, but I think you can still hear me. At least it looks like you can. Um, yeah, I mean, I'll play you the exercise. I'll play you the exercise, right? It's boring as hell, right? Okay, just listen. So that's it. The exercise is it's the exercise is a double bass exercise where you do straight 16th notes for a bar, and then you take out one 16th note every quarter note, and with each rotation you change which one you're taking out. So the first one, you take out the last 16th note in the bunch. So you do 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you take out the one before that, the next rotation. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you take out the one before that. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you take out the last one. And like, this is the problem. It's like, I get through those first three and I'm like, yeah, this is why I've never done this exercise. This is like so easy. Like, what? And then the fourth rotation, the last 16th note, of course, lands on the quarter note. So you leave the quarter note silent. And like, I just have struggled with that for like 2 weeks, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Like, I can't even speak it out loud and play it. The idea being that basically in the context of like a song, right, you might play that with the feet the pattern you're playing kind of changed up to the opposite. But in the context of this exercise, the idea is that you're just doing a single stroke roll, right? And so basically, I would probably play a pattern like that where you're not supposed to play on the quarter note, leading with my lead foot, even though it would mean that basically on the eighth notes, right, which is kind of where you want to be solid feeling, you're landing on your non-dominant foot. That would be kind of like my instinct. But the point here is like, no, you play it still right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. You just keep playing. Okay, sorry. I don't know what the deal there was. Just another 5 minutes of editing to put it on YouTube. No, I mean, the idea here is that you're just doing right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, you know, to translate it into righty speak, which I do automatically now. Yeah, the idea is just like you don't actually change the way that you're playing it. You just stick to the pattern. And it really makes you realize like how easily this foot that you're not leading with falls out of time. Like you really are thinking no matter what kind of pattern you're playing, you're just thinking in terms of that left foot. Like if you're playing like a triplet, an old school like heavy metal like triplet thing. Like you're really not thinking like 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6. You're really just like if you're really just on autopilot, you're really just going like like you know, this foot is just kind of over here doing like whatever. And like basically all you need to notice that is to basically lead off of a pattern with the wrong quote unquote foot. Right? That basically exposes you immediately as like, oh my God, like I don't even think about this foot. Like even when you're playing really quickly, you're just kind of thinking about keeping in time, which means kind of like keeping on the quarter note. So you're not really thinking about this foot, you know? You know, because that's the thing. If that's the thing that's leading off everything, it's kind of the timekeeper. And then it's just like, okay, double bass is when you play things in time with your lead foot, and then the other foot follows behind it as quickly as possible. Right? I mean, that really is kind of like the way that you perceive double bass when you're not thinking about it a lot of times, is that it's just like particularly quad fills, like what I just played at the end there. Like if you're not thinking about it, like you stop even thinking in terms of like 16th notes. They just become this like sputtering mess that follow the two very cleanly played notes on your hands, but they're not that. You can't just like crush those two notes in. I mean, there's a certain aesthetic quality to that, and there's moments where that's called for. I think a little crushed double bass like that right before like a flam on the snare leading into another measure can be like really sick, right? You know, like it's cool under certain circumstances, but it's like if you're just trying to play good straight time in like a metal context, it's like you can't just throw your feet in at the end of a fill. You need to really be like, where are those landing in the measure? That's how you get it to stop sounding like crap, right? And you think you have it until you're forced to focus on this weak foot. And like it's as simple as that. You don't need to expose any more weaknesses if you're like the average player. I don't know precisely what's going on with the tech, but we're just gonna power through and see what happens. Um, no, I mean I think the point I was making was that like the shocking thing about all of this, right, is that you don't even really need to. Okay, you can. Good. Yeah, I don't know what the deal is. Like I have internet connection, so OBS is disconnecting. I tried to check to see if there's any updates. I don't see any updates, so I don't know why that would be happening. Let me actually, I'm just going to fidget with some other things while I talk to you here. The thing about it that's interesting is that like you really don't need to dig that deep or get that complicated to start to realize that like things are really like not amazingly difficult to be. It's not really amazingly difficult to start to uncover stuff that you're like genuinely quite bad at, right? Like that's unless you're like Benny Greb or something like that, right? You encounter these problems really quickly. It's like I've tried to have like a solid foundational route to my playing for years now, right? Like I kind of embraced the fact that I came to the drum set after learning more about like traditional hand technique, right? Like my first probably like 2 years of playing, I was doing largely traditional grip, right? And that was like where I learned my hand technique. And then I played in drumline where I played the biggest, beefiest bass drum, right? And that was where I felt like I learned power in the hands. And basically everything since then with my hands has been like an exercise in basically balancing those two things, which is like the technical thing and the power thing, and trying to achieve like basically the ideal sound for that depending on the situation, right? And the funny thing about it is that even with that background that was all about like correct playing and like playing everything loosely and comfortably at speed, right? And being able to play like immensely complicated figures at speed, which was never something that I was like, I would say supremely great at, but it was kind of the foundation of my education on the instrument. I kind of felt like, I don't, revisiting the basics is something that like, it's only interesting in the context of if you're doing something basic with some crazy twist, right? So that was the point of like the rhythmic illusion stuff, the Gavin Harrison stuff, is like, let's play a straightforward rock beat, but let's like displace it in a way that makes it actually like really mind-bending and strange by stutter stepping forward a 16th note every couple measures. And that's even like the simplest stuff that Gavin Harrison teaches you, right? Is like displaced forward or behind by an eighth note. Then it gets into like 16th notes, right? Then you start getting really crazy because it's like, oh, I don't know. That kind of thing where it's like you're literally completely off the click of the metronome, but you're actually secretly totally in time. Right? Right? Like all of that stuff. It's like, oh, yeah, and you could hear that, So like I had a little bit of squiggliness in probably the middle part of the more complicated version of the metric modulation thing that I just played. But like honestly, that was like pretty decent for not having played the metric modulation stuff really in like months. That muscle memory is still there. And then like literally I'm telling you that like what I was told to do was like a basic double bass like coordination thing, and it's like, man, the final rotation of it is like the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life. Very strange. It's all very strange. I don't know why. I don't know why that's happening. But no, yeah, it's just very bizarre. I think it's interesting. Like, you really don't have to go that deep. And I think it was the thing that I keep thinking about every time I sort of try and fail to get that final rotation of that exercise up to a really high speed. The fact that I have to play it like deadly slow, like I think I have to play it basically at like this velocity. Yeah, like that's about as comfortably as I can do that last rotation of it. Every time I think about that and how I'm struggling to speed it up, I think about how like this point about how you just have to scratch the surface to find all of these kind of human little intangible kind of weak points in your playing and whatnot. It reminds me of what I think it was Mark Juliana said, who is like, you know, widely proclaimed as like maybe one of the greatest living talents on the instrument that's alive in the world right now. Right? That like if he really wants to humiliate and humble himself, what he'll do is he'll just do eighth note practicing on like a practice pad or like a hi-hat and snare, right? Which as and he said like just hearing the fact that there are always things that can be improved in like my eighth notes, no more complicated patterns, no weird timings, not even accenting the notes, just playing like flat, like no dynamic shift eighth notes. That is enough for me to be really humbled about it, which is just amazing, because that means that like Mark Juliana, who's like the proest of pro guys in like the East Coast jazz world or whatever, just the thought of him like sitting at home with like a metronome at like, I don't know, what's this tempo at? Like at like what? Like 80 BPM maybe? Just playing kick, snare, hi-hat for like an hour and just doing this. Just like sitting there and doing that with like no extra spice, no variation, and being like, and the fact that he's hearing things in there that are like, yeah, there's problems in there that I need to fix. It's like, you know, like if that's happening to Mark Juliana, right, then there's no hope for perfection for the rest of us either, right? So it's really just a case of like dealing with the hand that God dealt you and like absolutely working to make the absolute best of what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, you know, and like just being very conscious of them. And I mean, really, like it's crazy. Like we've played some fast stuff on this stream. It's like I certainly don't have the speed of like a technical death metal drummer. I mean, my God, I probably don't even have the speed of like maybe the average like Norwegian black metal drummer or something like that. You know what I mean? But like we've still played some pretty fast stuff. We've played, you know, the double bass runs on like Through the Fire and Flames and stuff like that. Would you ever think in a million years that like the thing that would be like really impossible for me to get a handle on would be like that is taking up like all of my concentration for that to not sound terrible at that speed. You know what like takes up not all of my concentration, but probably like 80% of it? Like all of that stuff is like just gravy. You know what I mean? But like ask me to start a double bass pattern on my right foot instead of my left, I like lose my mind. Right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how wise it is to try to play any super crazy, complicated music when OBS keeps seemingly cutting out on me. But maybe we should try something, and then I should call it quits, because the truth is I don't want to keep doing this if OBS is going to keep disconnecting from Twitch, which appears to be the problem. And I don't know how to stop it from doing that. And I feel like I'm getting back into the swing of things. So I feel like a shorter one tonight is kind of appropriate. Let's see. What can we do? I don't know. We could go for something simple and fast. I'm just trying to think of something we haven't played in a while. You know, the thing I really want to play is Painkiller by Judas Priest. The problem is that there's the drum solo at the start, and like landing the timing out of it would be like nigh on impossible. I've tried to like set it to a metronome at the start to at least like set me off at the right time, and I can't like program the metronome to do it correctly. It's very strange. Like I think this is about right, but then there's just this cacophony of noise. We could try it though. I have the drums on quiet after the solo just to try to keep me in time. I don't know what the rest of the track sounds like after this in the app. We could try it. I think I would need to amp up the volume on that a little bit, maybe. Whew, glad the OBS decided to stick around on stream for that one. Um, I I always like to add a little bit of the Richard Christie craziness of the part in Death when they covered that on the last Death album, because Richard Christie's performance of that, just in terms of the fills, even the drum solo, which is sort of slightly in certain parts modified, is just so incredibly unhinged and clearly probably like not recorded to a metronome, and like there's just like drum fills in places where like there's so many notes in such a small amount of space that it almost doesn't even make sense. Like it shouldn't really mathematically make any sense, and yet like somehow it still grooves so hard. Even though I think the sound of the instruments and the sound of the guitar solos I think is better on the original, but I always like to add a little bit of that wackiness from him in there, from good old Richard Christie. Yeah, I don't know. It's been interesting. I have my next lesson tomorrow, so if I make any progress on my stupid little double bass exercise that I have yet to master, I will check in and let you know, I guess. It's really shocking. I'm really shocked at how long it's taken to make real progress on such a simple exercise. But yeah, it's like totally revamped and changed my understanding of what it's important to practice if I want to get better specifically at metal. And I mean, it's great for the stream because I was feeling a little bit of a dry spell in terms of like, what do I want to talk to people about? And, because this is episode like 16 of this or something like that, 17, 15, I don't even know. And, like we've already covered a lot of ground in the metal world, I feel like. And I was like, man, what else do I have to talk about? And I feel like, again, I sort of scratched the surface on my practice regimen and was like, oh my God, there's like a whole universe of just totally untouched stuff that's like vitally important to talk about. You know what I mean? Like, again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Instagram has been incredibly corrosive, I think, particularly for drummers who are largely on a sort of visual heavy instrument. And, if it were up to Instagram and like the frickin', I mean, not to like make enemies before the show even has an audience or anything like that, but I guess we're going to do that anyway. It's like, if you were to listen to Instagram on like, the Orlando Drummer and people like this, you would just think that like the things you should practice are all like 4-stroke rolls split between the hands and the feet and 6-stroke rolls and then really fast doubles. Like if it were up to Instagram and guys like the Orlando Drummer and David Cola and like whoever else, all of drumming would just be like one unending live stream of a drum solo with tons of drag notes and fast doubles and 6-stroke rolls and 4-stroke rolls split between the hands and the feet forever, and 3 people would be tuned into it. And like that would be the entire history of the instrument of percussion. It would just be a never-ending, wheedly drum solo. it'd just be garbage forever. It'd just be very cleanly played garbage, for the most part, tuned up in Pro Tools after the recording. Right? Right? I mean, that would be it. It would not be like Richard Christie's drum solos in drum fills in their cover of Painkiller. Just manic, crazy, out of time, human, interesting, all that fun stuff. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'll play us out with something else simple, and then I'll be done. What have we not played? Let's see. Maybe we'll play something happy sounding, even though it's a little metal, just to have something fun to play. The timing on this is like impossible for me right now for some reason. I like can't feel the quarter note at the beginning of this at all. Maybe I just need to turn it up a little. We're gonna try this one more time and then I'm actually done.